All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Wherever you are, clinical research is important. I guarantee it. Welcome to CRPN Central, the podcast where we bring some of the best professionals in clinical research. We talk about all the challenges that we have, the most important topics, and importantly, we get something done. We work toward trying to make a better place. Coming onto the stage, Mr. Mitch Hilby. How you doing, Mitch?
Hanging in there, doing great
Oh,
as always. Glad to be
enjoying
back.
the summer?
It's been fantastic. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Beautiful weather. Mitch, we're going to have a very special podcast today. Number one, thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Unfortunately, one of our guests, Mr. Kelvin Peak, could not make it today. Kelvin, if you're watching this later, please feel free to bring in your comments. Let us know. I would be happy to have a separate small session with Kelvin Peak comments just to help to bring you into the conversation. Mitch, what do you think of the podcast?
I mean, they're all always great. Informed consent, though, I mean that hits close to pretty much everyone in research, or it should, at least, right? There's so much great crossover. It was really fantastic listening to Erica's portion where she's talking about her own personal experiences and how she carried her clinical research knowledge and kind of this great bridge between the two, being a participant and a clinical research professional. So that was fantastic, and I'm looking more to talking about that and diving in there some.
Mm-hmm. I have taken the training, the history. I have a master's in public health. Um, it's history that is very difficult to study because it's almost embarrassing to see what has happened across this history.
Right.
But I really do think this is history that we shouldn't be forgetting. We cannot be repeating what we've done before in the past. And unfortunately, Mitch, even in today's times, this time last year, I witnessed physicians making the same exact mistakes that were made in the early or the mid 1900s that pretty much created the regulations. So it's not over. It's really not over.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and it's frustrating, and that's why it's part of why we have these regulatory bodies and things in place, though, right? We want to make sure we can catch these things as quickly as possible, but it's tough. I mean, I was a CRA for quite a while. That's essentially part of my job there as well, is ensuring that good clinical practice and informed consent's followed, and the subjects are safe, and our sites are doing right by patients.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to bring our guest of the day on, Miss Erica Harris. How are you, Erica?
I'm good, Dr. Fox. How are you? Hello,
I'm
Mitch, as well.
No.
so good to meet you, Erica. So, for anyone who has not yet met you, would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Similar to my original introduction, I'm Erica, the energetic, respectful, inclusive, compassionate, and authentic advocate by your side.
Oh my
So
God.
I like to highlight that now in my career transition. So thank you for welcoming me on stage today.
It was wonderful the first time around, and then every time I heard it during the recording, but listening to it live, Erica,
Yeah,
amazing job.
that's great.
Amazing. It still has the energy in it. So Erica, so what do you do in this industry? So you're doing consultancy now?
Well, while I'm on a aspiring entrepreneurial journey right now, but yes, that's my goal, is to be a mentor, an advocate, and a consultant. So I'll be
Mhm.
calling myself a Mac of sorts. So a
A Mac
mentor,
of sorts.
advocate, and a consultant.
I love it.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
I've had the honor of attending some of your weekend discussions on LinkedIn. Could you tell me about one of those real quick?
Sure. So my series is on initiative, and what I did was broke down each letter of initiative and picked a topic. The first I was about, inspiration, and then I just went down and really dived into how initiative is affected by these various topics. The last one I did last Saturday was on intuition, and I think that really pours into curiosity and innovation and all of those things. So thank you for asking me about that.
And big call out to Mr. Ted Bardison. I agree with what Ted said. He said that's the best introduction I've heard in a long time, Erica.
All
Thank
right.
Very well done.
Literally the best energy you could possibly show up with. It's fantastic. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna get down to the topic. However, I've got a little surprise. So a couple things. Number one is informed consent is, in my opinion, one of the most important components of this industry, especially because of the history. We talked about that. And number two, unfortunately, Kelvin can't be here and we're going to miss him. And so we want to have something to talk about. One thing that I realized as I was listening to this is there were a lot of assumptions about informed consent that we had during the discussion. We have seen an informed consent before. We in the industry know what it's all about and what it's doing. But I figured since this is a very special moment, I would like to present to you an informed consent. I want to talk about it real quick so that we're all on the same page about what it looks like. So give me just a second to bring this up and we'll get down to it. I went to actually World Health Organization has a really good um, topic for informed consent. This is a template offered by the World Health Organization on informed consent on some of the things that we have to follow. The template is to follow. This is actually an instruction to the site or whoever might be using it. But Mitch, I had to laugh. Read the top. Read this footer right here. Ready? Please do not
please
submit consent
forms
forms
yeah,
on who letterhead.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
somewhere out
because you know it's happened. I mean, it's cut and paste everything.
Yep. Oops. So yeah, this is not a site. This is not a study run by WHO. This is just a WHO template. So for anyone out there who uses this, please just delete the WHO logo. They do not represent the trial that you are performing.
That's fantastic.
All right. So see in the red text here, that is all examples. This example in particular is for malaria. So we're going to be talking about this. Who on this call would like to be the mock trial participant or the potential participant? I'll go through here and walk through this with you.
I don't mind being the participant if that's okay with Mitch.
Willing to be my mock participant? Sure. All right. So, and actually, I had this as a couple different ways. So I did send this to Mitch ahead of time. So it would have been two different examples. One is I sent the informed consent to the potential participant before. And then now, Erica, you have not yet seen this, have you?
No, I have not.
All right. So this is a template. These are boilerplates. I'm going to make up some information as we go. You're going to see the little placeholders in here. You're going to see all the different placeholders we're doing this. But I'm Dr. Fox. I'm a coordinator with Research Now, called Research Now site. And so, Erica, it's really nice to meet you. Thank you so much for talking to me. This informed consent is for men or women who attend the Research Now site. And so now we're inviting them to participate in research on malaria. Okay, so the title of our research project is Malaria in this country so that we can help to stop it. That's the protocol. So you're going to see if this were an actual informed consent, you're going to see here's the PI, our name of the organization, the sponsor, the protocol, everything that you would need to understand where this is coming from and who you might be working with. Also, it's really important, Erica, that you will be given a copy of the full informed consent form here. So don't worry about it. And if you have any questions before, during, or after, please speak up. I'm here to help you. Okay, so the first part is just an introduction. So I am Dr. Fox. I'm working with Clinical Research Now. I think the site name just changed, but that's okay. We're doing a research on malaria, which is a very common disease in this country. I'm going to give you information and invite you to be part of this research. You do not have to decide today whether or not you will participate in this research. Before you decide, though, you can talk to anyone you feel comfortable with about research. This is totally in your control. Now, there may be some words that you do not understand. Please ask me to stop as we go through the information and I will take the time to explain. I want to make sure that you are fully informed before you make a decision. If you have any questions later, you can ask them to me or anyone on our staff, the doctor's staff. So far, so good?
So far, so good.
All right. So let's talk about the purpose of the research. Malaria is one of the most common and dangerous diseases in this region. The drugs that are currently used, they help people with malaria, and they're not as good as we would like them to be. In fact, only 40 out of every 100 people given the malaria drug, the current standard, they're the ones that are completely cured. So notice that this is layman's terms. We didn't say 40%. We even broke it down, 40 out of every 100. Now, Erica, the good news, there is a new drug which may be better. And the reason we are doing this research is to find out if that drug is better. So this research will involve a single injection in your arm, as well as 4 follow-up visits to the clinic. We are inviting all adults with malaria who attend this clinic to participate in the research on the new malaria drug. Now, do you know why we are asking you to take part in the study, or do you know what the study is all about now?
I understand it's for a malaria vaccine and to test its safety and efficacy.
Perfect. I love the words. I feel like I'm talking to a professional here. Now, this is very important, Erica. Your participation in this research is entirely voluntary. It is your choice whether or not you want to participate. Whether you choose to participate or not, all of the services you receive at this clinic will continue and nothing will change. So your healthcare will not change. If you choose not to participate in this research project, you will be offered the treatment that is routine for this clinic at this hospital for this disease. And we will tell you more about that later. You may change your mind later and stop participating, even if you agreed earlier. So, if you decide not to take part in this research study, do you know what your options are? Do you know that you do not have to take part in the research study at all if you wish? And do you have any questions right now?
I understand that it's voluntary. I understand the study contacts available to me, and I understand that I can withdraw at any point in the study. I'm aware and consent to continue.
Okay, thank you, Erica, so much. And thank you for your patience as we go through this. Now, the drug we are testing in this research is Malaragon. Okay, it has been tested before with people who do not have malaria, but who live in areas where malaria is common. We now want to test this drug on people who have malaria. So this is called a phase 2 trial. So we're not first in patient anymore. We're actually going to see if it works. So this drug is made by the company C. It's Malaragon. They name the same company as the drug. You should know that it has a few side effects, however. So it's really important to know this. One of the side effects or problems that you may feel is that you may feel tired the first day after being given the drug. Also, 20%, we went into percentages. Isn't that interesting? Up above, we only did 20 out of 100. So let's make this right. 20% of the people who tried this drug previously, they experienced temporary swelling at the injection site, and we don't know of any other problems or risks. Now, some participants in the research will not be given the drug which we are testing. Instead, they will be given the common drug, the current standard. This drug is the most commonly used in the region to treat malaria, and there is no risk associated with that drug and no known problems. It does, however, cure malaria as often as we would like, or it does not cure as often as we would like. That's why we're testing it. So it's like a comparator study. Okay, so participants in one group will be given the test drug, while participants in the other group will be given that common drug that is currently being used for malaria. Now, it is important that neither you nor we know which of the two drugs are given. This is called a blinded effect. The information will be in our files, but we will not look at these files until after the research is finished. This is the best way that we have for testing without being influenced by what we think or hope might be happening. We will then compare which of the two has the best results. Now, the healthcare workers will be looking after you and the other participants very carefully during the study. If we are concerned about what the drug is doing, we will find out which drug you are getting. So we'll break the blind, and then we'll make changes for your safety. We want to make sure that you are safe at all times. If there's anything that you are concerned about or that is bothering you about the research, please feel free to talk to me or any of the other researchers. Okay. So now we are going to take some blood from your arm by using a syringe and a needle. Each time we will take about this much blood and a little bitty spoonful. A vial, it's just a small enough container with a small amount of water in it. In total, we will take about 1 liter of blood, if that's okay with you, Erica. This much blood is across about 6 months. And at the end of the research in 1 year, any leftover blood, we will destroy it. So we will not be taking your data. We will not be compromising any of the samples that you had. This is solely for this trial. So in the first visit, a small amount of blood will be taken out of your arm, as we discussed. It's about a teaspoon, and it will be taken from your arm with a syringe. This blood will be tested for the presence of the substance in your body to fight infections. And we will also ask a few questions about your general health and measure how tall you are and how much you weigh. At the next visit, which will be 2 weeks later, you will again be asked some questions about your health And then you will be given either the test drug or the drug that is currently used for malaria. As explained before, neither you nor we will know about that side, like which drug you will be taking. After 1 week, you will come back to the clinic for a blood test. This will involve a number of things. Again, the syringe, we're going to take some vitals, some health information, and we're going to be continuing this for about 6 months. So can you tell me if you remember the number of times that we are testing and asking you questions? The research project, what do you remember about this? Can you tell me?
Okay, so far I heard that I will have 1 vaccination. I will be seen over a 6-month period for a total of 4 visits. However, I do question the 2 weeks later and the 1 week later if there's only a total of 4 visits. So right now we're doing my consent form. So 1 week later from now, I'm assuming we'll do my lab work. 2 weeks later from then, you'll get more lab work, and then I'll have 2 visits left in a time frame.
Yeah. So that's going to be about how it works out. That's a really good call.
Okay.
You've got that well. So can you still hear me, Erica?
I can still hear you.
Okay. I think I'm having some lagging on my end, and so we're doing our best for e-consents, but you really need good internet connections if you do e-consents, right?
Right,
everyone. So it's perfect. So now, Erica, this isn't all fun and games. There are some risks to this, and it's really important that you know these risks. So by participating in this research, it is possible that you will be at greater risk than you would have been otherwise. For example, a risk that your disease will not get better and that the new medicine doesn't even work as well as the old one. If, however, the medicine is not working and your fever does not go down in 48 hours, we will give you quinine injections, which will bring your fever down and make you more comfortable. Now, while the possibility of this happening is very low, you should still be aware of the possibility. We will try to decrease the chances of any of these events occurring. But if something unexpected happens, we will provide you with the medication that you need to be better. Okay. So do you understand that? Do you understand that there are risks involved in participating in this trial?
I understand. So I'm consenting currently as a healthy normal. So when you say that this will not ensure that my disease get better, right now I have not been diagnosed with malaria or any so I will maintain that healthy status, presuming or assuming, right?
Yes, exactly. So let's make sure that you maintain that healthy status.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you do participate in this research, you will have the following benefits. Any interim illnesses that were treated at no charge to you. So again, if you come into research for these things, they will be at no charge to you. If your child falls sick during this period, he or she will be treated for free of charge. So there you got a benefit for your child. And there may not be any benefit for you, but your participation is likely going to help us find the answer to the research question. So you could help future generations. Now, there may not be any benefit to the society at this stage of the research. However, the future generations will likely benefit. Now, one of the big questions, how much do I get paid? So we are going to give you $5 to pay for your travel at the clinic and parking. And then we will give you $1,000 for lost of work time for every visit that you come. You will not be given any other money or gifts to take part in this research. So can you tell me if you understand correctly the benefits and the potential compensation and reimbursements that you get?
Yes, you guys will pay for travel and parking, and then I'll be compensated for time lost at work. I understand.
Yeah. So, I mean, $1,000 for time off of work. I mean, is that coercive at all, or is that about right?
It's a bit high, but I can see that it may align with the exposure to malaria.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't coerce me because, I'm considering the risk. Like I said, that I'm a healthy normal and I would be taking this, assuming that I could be exposed to that. But the amount could be coercive to my child per se, to a person that is not, aware of, the risk. So
Erica, with this research, something out of the ordinary is being done in your community. It is possible that if others in the community are aware that you are participating, they may ask you questions. We will not be sharing the identity of those participating in the research. Now, the information that we collect from this research project will be kept very confidential. It's for our pharmaceutical companies. So information about you that will be collected during the research will be put away, and no one but the researchers will be able to see it. Any information about you will have a number on it instead of your name. So that's your subject ID or your participant ID. Only the researchers will know your number, and we will lock that information up with a lock and key. So it'll be very, very important. We keep it very secure. We're very serious about this. It will not be shared with or given to anyone except the ones who have access to information, such as the research sponsors, our Data Safety Monitoring Board, or your clinician. So do you understand the procedures that we have for confidentiality and information?
I understand.
All right. Mitch, I didn't want to take the whole stage. Are you willing to go over are you willing to take over?
Take it.
And
Take
explain
it.
this to our trial participant?
I went to the dentist today, so you take this.
Okay. Mitch is at the dentist. He's like, yeah, I'm good with this. Okay. So now, Erica, the knowledge that we gain from doing this research will be shared with you throughout the community meeting before it is made widely available to the public. Now, confidential information will not be shared. There will be small meetings in the community, and these will be announced. After these meetings, we will publish these results in order that other interested people may learn from the research. Now, this is very important. This is one of my favorite parts of an informed consent. Erica, you do not have to take part in this research if you do not wish to do so. And refusing to participate will not affect your treatment at this clinic in any way. You will still have all of the benefits that you would otherwise have had as if you didn't take the trial at all. And you may stop participating in this research at any time that you wish without losing any of your rights as a patient here. Your treatment at this clinic will not be affected in any way. So that's another example. So if you do not wish to take part in this research, you will be provided with the established standard treatment available at this clinic. And people who have malaria are normally given that drug ABC, not XYZ from above. Now, if you have any questions at all, you may ask them now or later, or even after. I'll give you my personal cell phone number. If you need anything at all at any time, please feel free to give me a call, and I'll be happy to get you connected to the right people.
Okay.
Now, this official, if we were in a trial, this was officially approved by the IRB. This is the committee. Their task is to make sure that research participants are protected from harm. And if you wish to find about anything else, any more information about this IRB, here's their phone number. Please feel free to give them a call. This is definitely a legitimate trial, and they have approved this. And it has also been reviewed by our local ethics board, by our group. So this is reviewed to protect you. So do you know that you do not have to take part of this trial at all if you do not wish?
I understand that the trial is voluntary participation.
Okay. So here's the certificate of consent. And so what we're going to do is we would have you read this, make sure that everything is okay. It's to your satisfaction, that you are fully informed and you have consent. And then we would ask you to sign this here as your participant and date and sign. And then further down, it says if illiterate, we would have your thumbprint and we would have the witnesses here. And then after that, here's the statement of me. So I would be filling this out, showing that to the best of my ability, I know that I have delivered informed consent and that you understand the informed consent and that you are in fact signing on behalf of this as a consented trial participant. I would sign it and you would have a sign-in date. So for anyone out there who has never been through an informed consent, I missed a few things and we'll talk about that later, but this is the general idea. So you want to make sure that your trial participants are fully informed throughout the process. So right. On that note, I'm going to stop sharing and let's get down to the podcast here. So Erica,
a copy of her consent and document the process.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Document,
exactly.
document. That's what I always heard.
Document. Yes, very much so. So we could do that through an electronic consent format. I know Kelvin had a really good point about electronic consent versus virtual consent. And so we can look at that. But I know it's been a little bit different of a podcast, but let's get down to business. So that was an informed consent for everyone out there. That's a general idea, a template by who. There's a lot of other things we can add there. I'm actually surprised they didn't have anything about injury and compensation or what subject injury. That's one thing that I'm really surprised who didn't have on there. But on that note, Mitch, I know you went to the dentist.
I mean, it mentions risk. They briefly touched on some of the known adverse events, but that's essentially it. But yeah, I mean the ICF as a whole, and the mock ICF that we ran through, the whole purpose of an informed consent is it's really like three-pronged. So you demonstrate respect for personal autonomy. You clarify that the research is distinct from clinical care, and it has the purpose of benefiting society, potentially. And I know that was specifically mentioned in the consent. But importantly, probably the most important part about the informed consent is the informed part, I would argue, because you can't really consent to something if you aren't informed, right? And that's requiring the accurate information about the purpose, methods, risk, benefits, and alternative treatments.
May I raise my hand here on Mitch's comment? The informed piece to me would be specifically because I'm in the States, how many malaria cases have it been? What's the likelihood that I would be exposed to it without this vaccination? Those things. And I was taking notes. I heard you say that if I'm not competent, I would have to give a thumbprint. I mean, how do you de-identify a thumbprint?
Ooh.
De-identified per se, and things like that. I did hear the risk of injection site pain, swelling, those things, but I didn't hear any risk with the 1 liter of blood, fatigue, and those things. So that would be my feedback as I'm going through this at this point. I didn't think of the injury piece of it because with vaccinations they're pretty standard. But I would presume that if I did come down with malaria and, as you mentioned, my care wouldn't change, meaning now my health insurance company is taking on my change in health status. So if they decide, that they don't want to cover something, then do I come to you and say my health insurance has denied care?
How would that work?
Cover it, right? So.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those ICFs, they have directly related or they'll use the terminology directly related to participation in the trial, which now you're really getting into it. What if this medication actually caused malaria? So is that something that would be compensated? So on the podcast, so Erica, we interviewed you. You've been in a number of trials as a trial participant, and then we interviewed Kelvin Peak. Kelvin Peak is a regulatory a regulatory representative at a site level. So he's the one in the background at the regulatory teams processing the informed consents and making sure that they're filed with the IRB and everything is up to date. So when we had those two interviews, I found some very good and interesting similarities between what a trial participant experiences and then what like a clinical research professional experiences on the other end. So what was your initial impression of the podcast and the interviews?
Well, like Mitch said, I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the takeaways. I do think that there are some ethical concerns that are shared both between regulatory and participant. And I think that is why the informed consent is so important, because it opens that door for those ethical conversations or hard conversations. Like I said, if I'm doing this to benefit society, but right now I'm a healthy normal, you would presume that, I don't know, guess that, that risk would be more risky than somebody that has already been exposed to it because their immune system has, fairly adjusted, or they've had their response, they have their antibodies. versus a healthy normal who's never been exposed to it, and et cetera. So I enjoyed the initial podcast and the takeaways that me and Kelvin shared together.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you and Kelvin both brought up the Tuskegee Airmen, and you brought up Henrietta Lacks very well, just as part of some of the history lessons that we can learn from and the reasoning behind the importance of the informed consent. And I think also, Erica, you mentioned clear and concise communication. That was a really, really big thing that we have to focus on for research. Now, Mitch, you told me a very interesting statistic right before the podcast. Would you be willing to share that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things, but I was browsing the hhs.gov site, and they do have a guidance section on there specific to informed consents as well. Now, they have multiple documents that you can browse in the informed consent guidance section, and one of them is a checklist. Now, the checklist is 26 years old. It's 1998, so a little dated, but I found it interesting that what I did was I copied all of that page, pasted it into Word, see what the word count was, and we were at 1,292 words. It's there's several articles that I've read over the years of my time in this industry where we talk about informed consent. It's an ongoing conversation. How do we improve this? And the consensus is always that they're too long, they're too hard to read, the trials in general might be just too complex. And when you talk about the length of an informed consent document in an educational setting, it's been shown that people are going to lose interest of reading, like comprehensively reading a document that's really greater than like 1,000 words, maybe up like 1,500. Some people like to read more. But that's equivalent to like 4 pages of text.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially like it's essentially impossible to have all 3 of these other aspects that are the major pain points covered and keep an informed consent form to 4 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So we are facing some challenges there, right? I mean, how do we address all of those individual points that we went through and talked through, and making sure that we're addressing all the potential questions, right? Like, I think ideally, it's great that Erica had questions when we were talking about the informed consent, but ideally, an informed consent should be comprehensive enough and clear enough that there aren't a whole lot of questions that need to be asked, because you should then be informed and not have to search for more information. Because Erica's been in industry, right? She knows her stuff, but there's so many other people out here who do participate in clinical trials that don't have any medical background. I mean, I worked in women's health, and it shocked me really almost every time how many women don't really understand like a regular menstrual cycle and how that works. So when it comes to healthcare and medical knowledge and medical information, I mean, Erica knows questions to ask, but most people aren't going to know, or they're not going to want to ask, or they're not going to be interested in ask. But it's one of those situations where you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what to expect, you might just not even ask those questions.
Mm-hmm. I think focus groups are a good answer to that problem. Right there in the hospital or in the clinic, there should be like dedicated. And I left this comment on a Sightline Clinicals post. They were discussing FDA diversity. And I felt like they covered, PI involvement and participant involvement and all of those things, but they didn't really focus on the people that advocate for the study. So, the clinical researcher can only do so much. The regulatory coordinator can only do so much. The PI can only do so much. That's why it's important to have these focus groups or these ambassadors that build those clinical relationships, or that literacy, or that, understanding of what's going on. And even as a standard of care practice, when pandemics and things like this arise, we should have a space in the healthcare space for people that are afraid because they don't know what's going on to go to someone and say, one hand I want to get the vaccine, on the other I don't, help me make the decision. And having that, like I said, what's the likelihood that I would be exposed to it if I don't take the vaccine versus, if I do, for, in quotation marks, herd immunity and things like that. So those are things that, really focus groups and clinical ambassadors can really help what coordinators and PIs do with this research to help streamline, like you said, the questions and the concerns and the retention rates and things like that.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's absolutely key. That's one of the big things from our company here at Diverse Trials too, is engaging those other stakeholders in the community, because if you're not talking to the patients, like what's the point, right?
Yeah, and you navigate patient-doctor relationships very carefully too, because a lot of people are, they're going to the doctor maybe because, that's the only doctor they had access to. They don't really like the doctor. And it's like, they're not willing to talk to them about any research studies. They're just there for the dire need that they have, and opening those doors to, surrounding clinics. I think they call them satellite sites and, things like that. That opens, avenues to really build those patient-doctor relationships that pour into the clinical data.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question, Erica. And I wonder, so you're talking about the advocacy groups and the relationships. Do you feel as though, like, sometimes maybe those groups could run patients through mock informed consent so that when a trial was up to date, that relationship would have already been formed? They already know what to expect before. Mitch always talks about transactional, and that's just like this thing. If patients don't understand what an informed consent is before they are consented, if they don't truly understand the purpose of an informed consent and all of these things, do you think it would impact their decisions to participate based off of the relationships that they have built?
I think mock consent forms, or like I said, mock exposure to what's arising in the healthcare space will definitely streamline questions and concerns and build engagement in those outcomes. Because while it may not affect me as a mom, 5 years from now this could be a big deal for my kid, and having those groups available, or that knowledge that we discussed available. I can teach my son, look out for these symptoms, look out for this, thing. And so I think they would streamline it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think, again, we always kind of have to take it back to an educational aspect. I don't want to dive too much into like the educational system specifically here in the US, but teaching to pass a test is a whole different ballgame. And I understand there's finances involved, but all the way back when I was an instructor for paramedic and EMT courses, I saw this gap, and I'm like, well, why don't we have more like basic first aid, standard healthcare information like in high school, right? Make it like kind of mandatory. Same thing with, maybe like personal finance management and things like that, right? Basic
life
accounting.
skills. We call those life skills, Mitch.
Exactly.
They got rid of economics and all of that stuff in school. They got rid of all that stuff, and now they're focusing on sports where you make money. They're focusing on healthcare where you make money, and politics. It's like they got rid of the life skills. So
Chasing the money.
Absolutely. But I think that's almost that same concept of like these life skills is part of the healthcare being like public health. That's something you should know locally, regionally, globally, regarding like public health concerns and issues. And I don't think it's too young to learn about it, in your teens. Yeah. My kids know about all this stuff like 10.
And you make a great point with teenagers, because, teenagers will get pimples and they'll just say, oh, that's puberty, it's just acne, when really they could have been exposed to smallpox or some other thing. And they're like, they don't know anything about it because who told them there was a pandemic on the rise? So you make a great point there. Yeah.
So I did. Okay. So Kelvin talked about virtual versus electronic consent. And he was his prediction was the utilization of technology for consent is going to be the future. It's just a matter of how we interpret it. So as to professionals in clinical research, what are your opinions about the e-consent process?
Are you asking me or Mitch?
Both.
So you take it, Erica.
All right, Mitch. I think e-consent, it is efficient. So that means it saves time. That, take it home, review it, your next appointment is in 3 days, we'll see you then, bring it with you kind of thing. So I think it's an efficient measure. However, we have to navigate, AI and altering information and altering text and selective reading and things like that. Like Mitch said, at some point through the consent, they'll get to the $1,000 and be like, "Yep, I'm it." Don't worry about it. So, and you really have to make sure that they understood the risk and what they were doing. So, I mean, I'm all for technology and streamlining things, but we can't just X out the human piece of it, assuming that everybody knows what they're reading or, things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, it definitely presents challenges to like even the clinical research side, right? That human element of being able to talk to a patient and build a rapport, build a relationship with them, earn trust. It's not that you shouldn't have maybe have had it to begin with, but earn the trust from that participant. So they know, right? They know that they can talk to you. They know that you're open and receptive and they can have those conversations, as opposed to like, okay, well, they sent me a PDF, or like I have to go to this web page and it's tracking my eye movement and I'm not allowed to click on the next page for a certain amount of minutes because it wants me to read everything, something that's be like ultra strict.
You're scaring me here, Mitch. I want to cover the camera. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, right. I mean, that's kind of the point. Like, well, there has to be lines drawn somewhere. But I do think it's a potentially good tool. And I think that's ultimately it's a great tool. So it's an item that we can potentially use, but I don't think it's necessarily like the answer. I think there should be multiple tools that we can work with. I know, Fox, we talk a lot about like neurodivergence, and you guys sit down and read a 47-page document. You know what I mean? Yeah. Hopefully your ICF's not that long. Please.
Yeah. Please. I'm reading the header. I'm reading the headers and the signature panels. No, I'm just kidding. I do joke about myself being neurodiverse, and it's like, I pick up on what I call keywords, kind of like the ATS application tracking system. If it has high compensation, if it has high risk, if it has high time involvement, those would be the things that draws my attention, not who to contact, not, the other stuff. So I agree that, it's efficient, but one measure I think we could implement with virtual or e-consent would be allowing the patient to go through and add their comments or highlights in the consent in real time. And then when they go to that actual appointment to consent and get started, it's like the doctor or the coordinator already knows what their questions are, what their issues are, and, they can plan for that ahead. So,
yeah. So we have a comment from Ted. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think e-consent live interaction to make sure that the events are not AI generated is an advancement we need to embrace. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. And I think it's essentially kind of like how we just did this mock consent, right? Maybe that's what you're getting at, but having that live interaction. So Dr. Fox is actually sitting there. If only there was a company, by the name of MedVector that would be able to utilize some kind of software to make that happen, right, Ted?
I know. I mean, who'd have thunk it?
Yeah. I think my takeaway from this comment is to make sure that even if it's AI generated, that it has been reviewed by an IRB and someone is not just impersonating a researcher to get your data to get, that's the AI piece to me, is the impersonation piece of it. So.
Yeah. So the one, and we've gone into this, especially with some of the elderly populations that we work with, but when you go all in on e-consent, is the ability to have an active email address going to be part of your inclusion exclusion criteria? The ability to access technology. I mean, I'm going to have to go to the library to check my email to be a part of this trial. That is one thing that we run into. And I know that we have sites, they literally just make email addresses and help the patients through that process. But there are some things that sites can't control, especially with socioeconomic status. I think we, even now, and it's only getting worse, we have these assumptions that as a society, we have access to certain resources that honestly some people don't have access to.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's the point of, essentially being able to be a tool, a functional tool, right? I mean, we just made some FDA DAP guidance and we ran it through AI, but I mean, it was all audio. So it's spoken audio, we're talking through the guidance, right? So you have that other tool that you could potentially use instead of just having to read through this documentation yourself. So maybe you can listen to it. I know when we talk about like pediatric patients, maybe this element of gamifying an assent for pediatric patients, so they kind of like play through the assent process, so they understand from a play perspective what they might have to be doing on the trial. So actually, we might get that they may really truly comprehend it a little bit more than just their parent trying to tell them stuff that they're not grasping onto because they don't know those concepts until they play it out themselves.
Yeah, I think in regards to having an email address, I think having those shared spaces where both the clinical study coordinator, the PI, and the patient share a space, I think that's important because not only for amendment updates or study changes, but compensation updates and those kind of things really play a part in that. And then as far as the gamifying for kids, I mean, I guess that's a good measure to make it kid friendly, but we have to be sure that that's not a form of coercion because a lot of kids play games to escape what their parents are saying or what's going on around them. And, they can really get sucked into a world of trouble if they're just playing a game and don't know that it's actually a consent form.
So if you, if any of your kids or if any of you are on a game called Roblox and you look up the term Diversatrials, there is an account called Diversatrials for that.
We might have a Roblox account, yeah.
Yeah, we might just have a Roblox account to try to play through a trial so that people are truly informed. And you're right, Erica, it is a coping mechanism for many children, for not just children. I know many adults, they'll use the escape into electronic games as
I play Royal Match crazy, so somebody could probably definitely trick me in Royal Match. I play that game crazy. Like I've even got sucked into paying for an extra life because I'm like, I have to beat this board tonight. So I completely get it, but I think with kids we have to really navigate it with a higher level of integrity of sorts. But I think there's data there, definitely, time spent playing, the way that their avatars are built, the way that they interact with others in the game, that there's a database of data in everything that we do, literally, how we grocery shop, how we play games, there's information in every behavior, that we could really utilize in, connecting or bridging gaps in humanity. And, like I said, intuition and things like that. So a lot of data for sure.
Well, so like this tool aspect though, right? We talk about e-consent, and I know Fox, one of your big things is top-down tech, right? Or you call it talk-down tech. Essentially, that's kind of the same process. Like, oh, we're only going to do e-consent on this study. All right, well, you're intentionally excluding people now. Great. Having these tools to be able to you want all the tools. I mean, I'm Batman, so of course I want a utility belt of tools. But you want your utility belt of tools for study, for consent at any process. I mean, same thing with payments, right? For patient stipends. I don't want to say you're only going to get paid this way. Like if we're going to pay a patient, let's make it convenient for them. Like, are we going to pay them through Venmo? Are they going to get like checks? Like are they going to get a prepaid card? It doesn't really matter to me, but whatever is most convenient for those patients and however we can best accommodate those patients is, I think, where we need to be trying to push, instead of like, well, let's make it easier for everybody else and enforce how we want research done to the population. And you're just inherently excluding people, which is
I think we're touching on flexibility, Mitch. Ironically, in informed consent, you have to be flexible with your trial participants. Yeah, there you go. Stretch it out.
I think adaptability is a takeaway for me because, paying a pediatric patient in Robux, for instance, would be sufficient if the trial is truly for that patient. But then if it's the parent trying to treat a child for, a condition that the parent is concerned about, then you would presume that parent would want compensation for their time off of work or the time that they had to, rear their kid through medication use and side effects and things like that. So I think we have to really be adaptable or flexible, as you mentioned, with, our methods of access. And even with e-consent, they can do it electronically, but then when they go to the visit, they'll have a printed version to have with them for reference or, things like that. So
Erica, you're in a very interesting situation. You are a professional in this industry and you're very good at what you do. Throughout your community, with the people that you talk to, with all of your friends, when you talk about research, I mean, what do you tell them about? What are their concerns about research as far as informed consent goes?
Well, way to put me on the spot. Actually, to tell you the truth, I don't spend a lot of time talking about research with my group of friends because I guess it's not a topic per se, but if I were to, sit with my friends and ask them about, how they responded to the pandemic and things, I think it would be just that, why did you get the vaccine? How did it affect you? What questions did you wish you had to ask before you got it and things like that. But that would be really, my experience and, trying to understand if we shared an experience, if theirs was different, why was it different? So honestly, I have to say that, I chose a path that is much different from the circle of friends or family that, I love so dearly. And I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it with them. So I spent a lot of time either on Google or on WHO or on, NHS or FDA. And that's kind of where I kind of learned my stuff outside of working in the space.
So what about you, Mitch? What when you're out in the community, you say, "So, Mitch, what do you do for your living?" And you're like, "Well, I work in research." How do people respond to it?
I mean, honestly, I don't get a whole lot of questions. Actually, on a recent podcast, we had a conversation actually about being a little bit more intentional with maybe the way that we talk about research, instead of just brushing it off like, "Oh, I work in clinical research and this is kind of what I do," but kind of bringing a little bit more of that excitement into what it is that you do. But I mean, I'm busy and I'm tired, and most of the people I talk to are just in research, so everybody already knows.
Yeah,
I'm
we're in a
not,
special bubble.
I'm not starting conversations at Kroger.
Yeah, it's like a uniform of sorts, like a police officer. It's not like you walk up to him and be like, "So what did you do today? Did you save, a man from a burning house?" Or, it's
Right.
just kind of like a thing that we kind of wear. So I agree with Mitch. Usually when I'm with my friends, it's to turn down from research and not turn it up more.
So if I'm at like a coffee shop or if someone strikes a conversation with me and they say, "Well, what do you do?" Because that's generally what they ask. I say, "Well, I'm in clinical research." And almost 99 to 100% of the time, the next question is identical. It doesn't matter who it is. And they say, "Oh, what kind of research?" That's the question. And it's like, it's clinical research. No, what kind? And so they're trying to understand. I guess there's this thought that research is siloed in a way that you're specialized in only a certain type.
Yeah, I mean, well, you think about maybe more of like the advertising for funding perspective, and people hear a lot about like cancer research studies and things like that. So, I mean, I think that's probably where the general public thoughts might go. But so I want to touch on some other stuff because I know we're running short on time.
Yeah, I see one question, Mitch, before you hop into your next topic. It says from Ted, "Erica or Mitch, would it help to have your local doctor introduce the idea of clinical trials?" And I do think that it's beneficial for doctors since they are credentialed, they are, educated, they do have a certain trust within community to introduce clinical trials. But I think it's more impactful to have patients that have been in the trial to talk to new patients about it, because they can speak to their risk, they can speak to their experience, and not just have the doctor's view of, yes, it's safe. Yes, I'm going to do everything to protect you. Don't worry, instead of those, basic jargon or blanket statements, they have someone that's willing to really share their experience. So
like a peer level advocacy.
Ted, you know where I stand on this. Absolutely, yes. I think it's great to have them introduce it. I want them to be very educated on what they're introducing, though, for sure. The problem we run into is similar to kind of what we talked about before, is like you don't know what you don't know. So as a patient, there's so many times just in a regular healthcare clinic, and I'm sure all of you probably have seen some degree of this. Well, I was a paramedic and an instructor for like a combined decade, right? So many pages out of me. It's like, oh, well, what are you taking? Or it's like, I don't have hypertension. Like, oh, okay, what is this med? Like they're on atenolol. It's like, well, what's that for? Well, my blood pressure is fine now. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're taking this medication. So you have this disease, right? You have these medications, but there's sometimes like, well, I'm taking this, this, and this. I got a red one, I got a blue one, and I got a yellow one, and these 2 white ones that I take, and those are the meds that I'm on. And they have no idea, right? So they're not necessarily even having those conversations about their standard healthcare with their physicians. I mean, I've had to explain things in the field, like in my ambulance, about like congestive heart failure to a patient. Like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I'm ever hearing about this. And I'm like, yeah, your cardiologist didn't have this conversation with you. Like, you don't know that you're ultimately going to die. Like what?
Yeah. And just to play devil advocates here, just 1 second, because, there's always a negative to a positive. I think some doctors, and I think it's safe for everyone to agree, when they're presented with a clinical trial, they see the monetary benefit to the department or to their credentials or to their partnership with WHO or FDA or something like that. And again, they don't know what they don't know. They're doing it because it comes with a benefit. It comes with a price tag. So we have to consider that as well in some spaces with some doctors, that they really took that trial on for the financial benefit. And, they're navigating it in that way. So,
well, Erica, too, I mean, when we talked about like pandemic, right, there's a significant number of people who don't trust their physicians or physicians in general. But who you do talk to about it are your friends or your neighbors or the people in your community. So to your point, that value of having those quality conversations of like, oh no, actually, like, yeah, I did this in research. I was in a research study and they were awesome. And this is what we did. And this is what we talked about. And it was great for me. That goes so far as those advocates within the community, because those are the people. It's like, for a fact that they got nothing. They got zero benefit out of it other than just like sharing their experience and talking to you about how great it might have been for them.
Yeah. And that's where the importance of satellite sites come in too, because someone might be, more apt or comfortable at, U of M for say, sorry if it's not okay to drop names, versus going to Henry Ford. So, having those satellites or those partnerships allows patients to say, well, I don't want to go to the city. I want to go to the suburb, and that, builds and doesn't lose, like I said, that patient retention and things like that.
We're going back to flexibility, and not just for informed consent content like paper, electronic, whatever it might be, but also flexibility in the trial participants' ability to get to where they need to be a part of the trial. So flexibility is floating up pretty high.
So I want to bring up something real quick too. So, and I know we talked about like Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks. Tuskegee fed more into like, that was this Belmont report leading into Common Rule. But even before that, you have the Nuremberg Code following like World War II and Declaration of Helsinki. But I mean, that's not, there's constant amendments and evaluations, and we meet and we revise and we grow. But I found something, several years back now, but back in 2010, and I found it again, and it reminded me, because I kind of forgot about it. It didn't seem too significant when I first came across it, but HHS, OHRP, the Office for Human Research Protection. In 2010, not that long ago, pretty recent, 2010, they have an article that they posted regarding a violation for penalties for students who failed to show up for scheduled research appointments. And it was like, no, we can't punish them for not wanting to show up to a scheduled appointment if they don't cancel within a certain amount of time, because that was actually something just recent. I mean, I think 2010 is still recent enough. I'm not
over a decade, but yeah.
We're not that old.
Yeah, I would like to ping in here before we close out and say that when I was discussing joining this with Daniel, I highlighted that being in a research study is similar to taking on a job. So for students or anyone that signs up for a research study, you would presume that that initial $1,000 payments means you're going to come back for the next payment. Otherwise, it's like, you took on a job and didn't do the job. So I could see where that arises from, but that's where we have to really break down our payment schedules and break down, things in a way that's doesn't cause us to lose resources when we lose patients and things like that. So I do think being in a research study is similar to a job description. It's similar to taking on a job. And, while you can't change the voluntary participation of it, you should definitely navigate, payment schedules and things like that in a way where you're not losing if a patient decides no, just because. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. We're at the hour. So, Erica and Mitch, if I were to ask you, what would you like to tell the entire community here about informed consents, the informed consent process, and how we can make it better in this industry? What would you tell them? So,
Well, my takeaway, Mitch, if you're going to be a gentleman and let me go first, is that informed consent forms is a mode of communication that builds, our trust in science. And I believe that we should definitely continue doing informed consent forms in order to navigate, some of the things like flexibility and, literacy and things like that to ensure that we still can collect research data to benefit the larger population in the world. So that would be my takeaway.
I love it. Mitch?
Yeah. I think my biggest takeaway is more on inclusivity. And that starts really with, maybe it starts a little bit before the informed consent process, but that is that first interaction with the patient. I think the industry as a whole, we need to continue to push to try to do a lot better job at translations. That would be something that is key with informed consent documents. We talk about specific, not just advertising material, patient-facing material, like advertising little flyers. Cool. Yeah. We can translate those and maybe, help to bring in a certain population, but it's most important with the informed consent that we have those documents translated, because those are the documents that are actually informing the patient and that they're agreeing to consent to the study. So if we can at least do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Mitch, I'm a talker, sorry guys, but commercials, radio advertisement, those kind of things, since we are auditory and visual people, we really need to have those in many formats to really engage, before the consent form, because they'll come into the doctor's office and say, hey, I heard on the radio, such and such, and next thing you know, they have a trial participant. So I agree with what Mitch is saying, that inclusivity through, minimizing language barriers are important, but there's modes like TV and radio and places where we can get, patients that we need and the engagement that we need. So thank you, Mitch, for that feedback. And thank you, Daniel, for having me today as well. Dr. Fox, thank you so much.
No worries at all. So I guess for me, it's just an observation, but everyone loves to talk about patient recruitment, and everyone loves to talk about ClinOps, and everyone loves eReg. But if you say the word informed consent to some people, they think it's boring. Oh, it's informed. Ugh, I don't want to talk about that. I feel like informed consent is literally the most important thing that we do in this research, because if we are truly patient-centric, like we should be, then the informed consent should be the number one thing to pay attention to. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see how people view the informed consent process, almost like a formality, just got to get through it. It's written by lawyers for lawyers. That's not the intention. That's not the history. That's not the intention. And I think that it's really important that we take it a little more seriously than we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of
we should highlight that it's a safety measure. That would just one word, safety, safety.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's not just something to do because you have to do it. You have to really give it the respect that it deserves.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see. I guarantee you this will probably be one of the least viewed live events ever, right? Because nobody wants to talk about informed consents. But let's change that. Seriously. We
We're gonna
really need to make
print some t-shirts.
Yeah. I'll be sure to share it out, and I'll be sure to, make comments and tag people and bring in some engagement, because I agree. And not only for clinical research, but, consent in a lot of things is important. And if we can translate that, in various ways, I think we could get lots of buy-in. So I appreciate the time here today. It was very engaging. Thank you, Ted and Heidi and others that engaged in the comment section. So I look forward to doing this again in the near future.
All right. So everyone, CRPN Central, this is Dr. Fox. Please consider to like, comment, and subscribe. The best podcast in the industry. That's what I'm striving for, and I can't do it without you. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.